at the library Minion, in lieu of a traditional Torah service, we get out the Eitz Chaim, the red books that you have in the pews in front of you, and we do a Parashat study, a deep dive into the text with commentary and plenty of time for our own questions and comments. Last week, for Parashat Pinchas, we spent 40 minutes on the first 3 lines of the Torah portion. 40 minutes on 3 lines. And if that isn't telling enough, we weren't even close to done with our conversation when we had to finish up and join the rest of the kahal for lunch. And if I were to venture a guess about what would happen if we were meeting this morning and picking up the Chumash to dive in and study some Torah, I would say that we probably wouldn't make it very far before last week's topic would once again become the subject of conversation. I think there's a reason for that. I think there's a reason that this war with Minion that takes up the last 3 parshiot of the book of the Midbar, the book of Numbers, that becomes the last great act assigned to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, our teacher, before he dies overlooking the Promised Land, hits us as readers so viscerally today. And by today, I mean mamish today. Not just as Jews living in the modern world, but specifically who we are on this morning of the 2nd of Av 5779, on August 3rd, 2019. 2 days into the month of Av, where we commemorate the destructions of our past and study the pain and the sorrow of the book of Eicha, that we might learn and avoid destructions in our future. That visceral jolt, that electricity, comes from what this ancient war was all about. According to Chazal, according to our rabbis of blessed memory, the Midianites did something to us that nobody else in our history had done before. While others had attacked us, had killed us, destroyed our homes, our fields, our bodies, the Midianites transcended that warfare and focused instead on our morality, on our souls, on the essence of who we are. They didn't just war with us, they seduced us. They wooed us with idols and riches, with sex and with power, and they used the division and that internal battle to turn us on one another, to weaponize us against us. And it worked brilliantly. 24,000 Israelites died at the hands of other Israelites. And most famously of all, the graphic death of Zimri and the Midianite woman he was with, Cosby, who were impaled by Pinchas in what is hailed by the Torah as a zealous act of righteousness, but what the commentators consider paradigmatic of what happens when religious fervor leads to hatred and violence, telling us essentially what not to do when the world feels like it's in crisis. 24,000 dead because they wanted so badly to believe in the hope and in the peace that was in front of them. The poetic blessings of Balaam, the open arms of the 5 kings of Midian, the promise that their God would look after them just like their own. And finally, at last, they belonged. They were home. And here's where the jolt hits us. Because they weren't. And right now, as politicians on both the right and the left use the Jewish people in our homeland as chips of favor for votes, and our inner family divisions as fuel for their own political interests, our place as a people with a long and proud history in this country, where we had to fight for the right to go to Ivy League and other schools, to belong to country clubs, to get into certain restaurants and businesses, to own a house in Franklin or in Lathrop Village, is being challenged yet again. And this time, it's driving a wedge between us. And we have to stop pretending that this is okay. We have to stop pretending that shirking our values and the goodness, the kindness, the righteousness that has helped us endure for thousands of years for neo-political tribalism is consistent with our history or with the essence of our peoplehood. We have to stop pretending that it's okay that Jewish family members have stopped speaking to one another. And not because someone forgot to send a thank you note or a relative erroneously took credit for a family kugel recipe. Those are reasons that we don't speak to each other. Those are Jewish reasons that we don't talk to one another. But because we have decided that our political identities are more important than our Jewish identities. We have to stop falling into the traps of those that want nothing more than to see us lose our sense of who we are and our responsibility to one another so that they can claim our individual loyalties. And if we are committed to this, to getting out of this rut of infighting and familial mistrust, then we have to commit ourselves to the difficult task of remembering. There will, in Yirtz Hashem, with God's help, be plenty of time to sit down and to have those hard conversations that we need to have with one another. To lay out with honesty and vulnerability our fears, our frustrations, our anger, our disappointments, our sadness. But first, we need to remember who we are. We need to remember that long before there were Democrats and Republicans, there was a small and stubborn people from the rocky plateaus of the Near East whose home was destroyed, and yet who continued to live with pride, with faith, and with joy, and who refused to give up their story even when holding on to it meant losing their place in society or even their lives. We need to remember that despite countless exiles, despite forced conversions where Jews were put into cages and dunked into rivers as a form of mass baptism, despite the murders of the Crusades, the pogroms of Poland and Russia, and the extermination of European Jewry, that people called Israel refused to capitulate and continued to wake up every morning and to go to sleep every night with the words, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Our story has outlived empires, humbled pharaohs, defied despots, and humiliated dictators. It's a story that we promise not only to carry with us, but to bind upon our hearts, to attach to our gates and to the doors of our homes, to teach to our children, and to dance on our lips as we journey together as a family. It's a story that is priceless. Priceless. And it is one that is far too important to be tainted by the dog whistles and manipulations of pundits and politicians. We don't need a kumbaya moment, although I wouldn't be opposed to it if anyone wants to do it. We just need to do what we've always done. We need to tell our story because it is everything. It's everything that we are, and it's everything that we've promised to be. It's our birth story and our coming-of-age story. It's our high school yearbook, our wedding video, and a treasure of photo albums, heirlooms, and instruction booklets. But most importantly, our story is a reminder that we live it today with the same promise, the same commitment, and the same responsibility as the millions who came before us, who fought with every breath they had to ensure that it would be the greatest inheritance this world would ever know, and that it would live on not with us, but through us. So, spoiler for those keeping up with our Torah readings, Minion doesn't win. That's not how the story ends. We make it, not only through this book, but through the next book, and the one after that, and the one after that. And the paper and the papyrus of those books continue to run with ink for thousands of years and millions of pages filling shelves and shelves filling libraries, bringing us to this page, to the page of the 2nd of Av, 5779. The story's here. It's today. It's now. Let's get back to telling it the way that we were meant to, together. Shabbat Shalom.